Balancing being an athlete and being an attorney is pretty difficult, especially as I have cases build up and go to trial. They take a ton of time, and training takes a ton of time. My days are really long. I wake up early, I train hard, then I come to work. But for me, that balance is kind of important. I have always been the kind of person who tends to do better at everything when I have more things going on. So if I'm training really hard, I'm probably a better lawyer. And if I'm lawyering really well, I'm probably better on the bike. The first lawyer who really had an influence on me is my grandmother, my mom's mom. When I was 8 years old, she used to take me to her office with her a lot. And, for a kid, it's just fun to be in a different environment. So I, got to see her working and meet the other people in her law firm, and she got me really excited about it. Recently, I was visiting her and went up into my old tree house from when I was a kid, and I found some of my corporate documents that I created as a child. So I found a piece of paper that had my childhood handwriting on it, and it was an articles of incorporation for a business where my grandmother was the president and I was the vice president. And then when I was in high school, my dad decided to go to law school. Before that, he was a stay-at-home dad and a business owner, and he worked in marketing. And anytime that I got the opportunity to, I would go to classes with him or anything that he was doing. We would have dinner with his professor, or I went to his constitutional law class and sat in the front row. And I got more interested in law than I was in a lot of the other stuff that I had going on in my life. And it was also really inspiring to see my dad making such a big life change and just taking the leap. And it's still really cool because he lives pretty locally here. He's up in Vancouver, Washington, so we still get together and have dinner and talk about law. It was definitely weird to be, 15 years old in a classroom full of law students and sat in the front row because my dad was a gunner in law school. But I think I was really interested in learning about the way our society works, and just became really curious about the way that law kind of shapes our world in a lot of ways. When the professor started cold calling people, I really kind of wanted to get cold called, and I wanted to have the answer even though I didn't. Some of the law students started giving me law books and their used textbooks, or I got a copy of a book called Are Prisons Obsolete? That maybe is what started me down the path towards wanting to represent individuals and people instead of corporations, and start fighting the powers that be. So my bike story actually starts with competitive horseback riding, which is surprisingly common. I was a competitive horseback rider for almost the entire time that I was growing up. And I ended up getting a pretty significant concussion and sort of lost my interest in that sport. But I still needed a way to stay in shape, and I still wanted to go and visit my horse. And I got a bike, and I fell immediately in love with riding my bike. One day I was out just for an errand run, and I saw a sign that said bicycle racing track. Call this number, learn to ride. And I thought, what? I could just call a number and I could ride my bike on this totally banked track. That sounds super fun. So I called and I signed up for the introduction to track cycling class. I think that was my freshman year of college. It just clicked. I was sold immediately. I loved the sport. I loved the community around it. And I got pretty good pretty quick. So at Track Nationals in 2019, my first time competing at that level, one of the major races on the track is the Omnium. It takes place over 4 races, and then you get a score at the end. The first 3 races went really bad for me. I finished last or next to last in the first 3. I called up my coach, and he said, well, I guess you have no choice but to lap the field. So why don't you do that? And I thought, obviously I can't. I'm last or next to last in everything. But sure. And so I did. And I finished second in the final race of the Omnium and got an 8th place overall. And that was pretty confidence inspiring for me. So the next day I had another race, and it's just a timed individual event. At that time for women, it was 3 kilometers, and I placed 3rd in the country. That really set the tone for me and my cycling career pretty early on. I think that was my 3rd year competing at all. I think it was in 2016, and there's a group of cyclists up in Vancouver, BC. It's a really big club. It's called Gastown Cycling. Every Sunday they went out for a big group ride, and one day a driver coming the opposite direction swerved into their lane and hit the entire group. And it killed someone who was a new father and had a really strong rippling impact throughout the entire community. Cycling communities tend to be really close-knit, and there's a lot of community support. It got me really inspired to represent cyclists who are in those situations, or to find some way that I can help people who get hurt and help their families recover from really traumatic incidents. The cyclist who was killed that day, his name was Brad Dean, and his story kind of lives on with me, and I think with a lot of people to this day. Since then, I've known a lot of people who've been hit by cars and hurt by cars, a few people who've been killed by cars. I, on a lighter note, myself was once hit by a car, and the driver had the nerve to get out of the car and say, "Look at the scratch that you did on my car. You're the 2nd cyclist that I've hit this week. My car is getting really damaged." And all of these stories, from the really sad ones through to the sort of silly thing that happened to me, there's just this common thread of we don't really have a good way to deal with these situations without a lawyer getting involved. My number 1 goal is that people don't get hit by cars in the first place, but my number 2 goal is to get the best recovery for them after something horrible happens. I first found out about Oregon consumer justice and Oregon consumer justice law by meeting people like Matt Kirkpatrick and Robert Lee, who are involved and just so interesting and engaging to talk to about the law. Their passion for what they're doing is really inspiring. I don't know if a lot of lawyers have an opportunity to do work that's so inspiring. I was at a crossroads when I came to work here. I was considering going solo. I was considering stopping being a lawyer and going back to being a professional athlete. But as soon as this opportunity came up, I knew I had to take it. It's so cool to be in a role as an attorney where I never really have to make these big moral compromises. One of my big things that I always tell myself as an athlete and as a lawyer is that if I'm gonna make a compromise, it has to be a really good one. And here, that hardly crosses my mind. Oregon's a special place for like so many reasons. And one of those reasons is that we've got really great legislature here. There are a lot of really strong consumer protection laws, and it's really important to me to fight for people's rights to be able to use those laws as they were intended to be used. I set a goal for myself of just racing every race in Oregon. And that was really fun. And when you race every race, you're gonna get some results. So I started winning again, and I started liking winning again. I got invited to the Olympic Training Center for a track cycling talent identification camp. And I was pretty nervous because I had not ridden my track bike since 2020. But when I got an invite like that, like this once in a lifetime, I thought that was once in a lifetime opportunity. So I just packed up and flew to Colorado. That was a really fun experience, and I surprised myself. I still knew how to ride a track bike, and I did some power testing, and by the end of the camp, they told me that I met or exceeded every single criteria for Olympic qualification. So I got invited back again. And at this point, I don't really know what the future holds for me in cycling. I have some opportunities that would be really cool to pursue, but it's tricky to balance that with being a lawyer and wanting to perfect the craft as much as I can as an attorney as well. As it is, I'm really looking forward to a season this year where I'll be able to hit some of the highest level professional road races in the country and feel really supported in doing that. Being an athlete who sometimes represents other athletes is a really cool opportunity. One of the things that I love about working with other cyclists is the attitude that they have. So usually, you know, if somebody calls me, it's usually under a pretty dire circumstance. Somebody's been injured. There's nobody that I've talked to that has a motivation to get better quite like cyclists. So it's kind of an inspiring experience to talk to somebody who's just motivated. Like they're gonna do whatever it takes to make their best recovery, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to help them.